Good morning, and thank you for joining us. So my name is Garrett Sheehan with the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce. We'll get started in just a moment. We'll let a few more people fill in, and then we'll get underway with today's.
Was I frozen or is Garrett frozen?
I think Garrett's frozen.
Hold on, guys.
That works.
Quick change of scenery there.
All right, I think I got cut off in what I was saying a moment ago, but thank you everyone for joining us. Had a little computer issue, so I'm now using Tamika's, but thank you everyone. Welcome to Conscious Commerce. We will be getting underway. We'll give it just another few seconds here to let people in, and then we'll get started. All right, well, good morning, everyone. And again, my name is Garrett Sheehan. I'm President and CEO of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce. And welcome to our event this morning, Conscious Commerce. We have a great panel that we will speak with. First, before we begin, we want to, as we always do, thank all of our investors who help us support this programming. You see their names on the screen. We'll scroll through. Throughout the year, we are able to put on webinars like this because of their support. And so a big thank you to all of our investors here at the Chamber, and also to our councils that allow us to do this. And so today's program is brought to you by Conscious Capitalism, the Connecticut chapter. We've been working with the Connecticut chapter here at the Chamber for several years now, and excited to be able to put on this type of programming. You should join Conscious Capitalism if you're interested. They do programming throughout the year. They've done a number of webinars over the course of last year, but now also ways to get connected around this very important topic. We'll get underway in just a moment. I'll introduce all of our panelists. So we have Paul Murphy. He is a board member and former, excuse me, a little issue here, and founder with MVVP LLC. We also are joined by Kathy Saint. She's a board member and president and CEO of Schwertel Incorporated, and Gavin Watson, chair and former vice president of operations at Watson Incorporated. We're going to start the program off this morning, tossing things over to Glenn Mcdermott with Red Rock Branding. And Glenn has been involved in Conscious Capitalism for several years. And Glenn, great to have you on, and thank you for bringing this panel together with us this morning. I think you're going to start us off just talking a little bit about conscious capitalism and what it means. That term gets tossed around, but there is a really clear definition, and it's something that all business owners should be aware of.
Thanks, Garrett and Tamika, and it's really good to be in your company. I really value the work that you do in cultivating a business community and the idea of shared prosperity that you've been behind for many years. So it's great to be here. But I did just want to kind of open up, just tell a little bit about what it is, what it means. Conscious capitalism, we're part of a global movement, and you know, we believe in capitalism. Obviously, we're all here because we do, but particularly because it's based on shared values and ethical exchange and so on. But you know, it wasn't long ago when it was okay to dump toxic chemicals into the river if it meant shareholder value, right? And there is evidence of that in the hundreds of brownfield sites around Connecticut. So that was acceptable then, and we made the changes to it. So this is the system that we can tweak and make changes to. It's an operating system that we can do better with. So we have our sort of 4 tenets, if you like. One is that your company really needs a higher purpose. Everyone needs to make money, but there needs to be a higher North Star as to what you're doing, like the why of your organization. And the stakeholder orientation, not just the shareholder one, which is one I described earlier, but the fact that your company, your business sits within a community, multiple employees, vendors, community partners, that are really part of your whole ecosystem, and you should view it that way. And then culture and leadership, you've got to make a fun place to work, particularly now when we're getting this great resignation, they call it. You really need to, as an employer, create a culture that people want to come to work at. So that's all fine, but what does it do for your business? Well, in fact, a lot. The companies that operate under this principle have seemed to outperform the S&P by 14 to 1. So this is not about corporate welfare. This is not about looking good and hugging the trees. This is about really good alignment of all of the human-centric issues that your business runs, and the results are quite outstanding. The global movement of conscious capitalism has been around for about 10 years, founded by John Mackey from Whole Foods in Rhodes, Sodia. There's about 50 chapters globally. And but in Connecticut, we were founded in 2016, and since then we've been running programming that includes all of these great brands that are doing tremendous work around sustainability and great places to work and social impact and racial equity and all of the hot topic issues that we're dealing with day to day. Like I said, it's about engagement. You know, with so many people looking for more than just clocking in, clocking out. We spend 90,000 hours in our lifetimes at work. So our jobs as employees is to make sure that that is time well spent. As employees, we have more influence on the health and well-being of our workers than the family doctors do. So we've got to respond to that responsibility. Thanks, Garrett, for introducing our speakers today. And we thought we'd kick it off a bit and just do it a little bit different rather than this chalk and talk idea. We wanted to throw some more provocative statements up there because, you know, we've been walking into CEO's office and they're kind of suspicious of this idea of conscious capitalism, but there's no reason to be. And today we thought we'd just sort of open it up with some provocative statements about what conscious leadership looks like. So I'm just going to sort of kick this one around. I can you know, Gavin and Paul and Kathy have all had different answers to this, but I will just kick it your way, Kathy, because I know you're particularly fired up about this one. And then it's really just open conversation. So, and later in the call, we'd love to get some challenges from those on the call to see what they have in mind as well. So, but let's kick it off there, Kathy. What do you think?
So my family business is fourth generation, 142 years old. We manufacture tools that are used in automation and decorating on plastic parts. And so being a fourth generation, you know, you don't want to be the one that, you know, the generation that kills the family business. No pressure. But when I took over, we had a very structured job descriptions and pay categories and annual reviews and things like that. And I had my avocation with psychology. That's what I studied in college. And I'd been reading research by a guy named Alfie Kohn on what really motivates people. And I think probably a lot of people here will have, you know, run into the research around people not being primarily motivated by pay. And in looking at that and looking at trying to create a more collegial and supportive atmosphere, back in the day, we had some guys who were, I guess you could call them kind of prima donnas. They were maybe the best at what they did, but they were not nice. They weren't team players. And when I came in, I really wanted to change that culture. And I did two things. One of them was I practically immediately fired the guy that everyone thought couldn't live without. But I fired him based on values issues, not performance, on the fact that he wasn't treating other people well. And then I very quickly realized I had to get my handbook in line with what I was preaching and change the way that we did things. And so I got rid of annual reviews because I did some research on annual reviews and how basically my job is to manage the system. And if I manage the system well with my team, then values issues are going to be rare, and that people who really don't go with the team are going to deselect on their own because they're just not going to be comfortable working in that environment. And if I manage the system, then I've got to evaluate my people on how they're functioning in the system, and they have to have feedback also on how the system is affecting them. And so I changed the way that we evaluate people. I got rid of a lot of job descriptions and really rewarded cross-training and working across the aisle to help others out and getting work done, and creating a much more flexible, agile organization. And I think in some ways that's helped us get through the Great Recession and certainly getting through this COVID time. Everybody just came together beautifully. I was really grateful for the wonderful people we have. So those are just a couple of the ways that I worked on getting the stakeholders in my company on board with my way of my philosophy around, as Glenn said, 90,000 hours of your life you're spending. Let's make darn sure that you're walking into a place where you have a good feeling, nothing bad in the pit of your tummy, and you are really finding a rewarding experience. So.
Thanks,
Glenn?
Kathy. And I must say that I haven't walked your factory floor, but I have walked through Gavin's and Paul's, and it's something you literally feel in the air.
Yeah.
It's a dynamic energy. It is a feeling that you're welcome, and the people that are there are emitting a positive vibe of like, yeah, we're having fun here, and it's quite discernible. So, Gavin or Paul, you want to jump in there?
Sure, I'll jump in. I'll just explain from my standpoint why this conscious capitalism idea makes so much sense. If I'm explaining it to a group of people and how this all works, and the reason is because it's the reason it works is because it's based on what's obviously true. If you've got a group of people and most of them are altruistic, and one or more of them is selfish, the selfish individuals will basically take advantage of the altruistic people in the group. However, if you can get rid of the selfish individuals in the group and have a group of just altruistic individuals, the altruistic group will outperform the group with the selfish individuals in it, right? And so this is all based on the research and the work done by evolutionary biologists recently, especially David Sloan Wilson. So, you just see logically that makes sense. So if you can form an altruistic group and keep the selfish individuals out of the group, that altruistic group will outperform the selfish group. And you can imagine, our ancestors 50,000 years ago in a group, or you could imagine a group of people today working in a company. It doesn't really matter. It's the same idea. And it's the same thing, whether it's a group of 5 people, or whether it's a group of 150 or 300 people in a company, or whether it's a group of 3 or 4 or several dozen companies working in a economic ecosystem. If they can form an altruistic group where that group helps each other out and works together and creates value for each other, intentionally, and recognizes that they are a group, they do depend on each other, they do care about each other, and remove the selfish individuals from that group, you'll have a much higher performing group. And you can hear it essentially in what Kathy just said. What she did, she's a conscious leader, and a conscious leader's job is to create that altruistic group, which inside the company we call a conscious culture. And outside the company, that is essentially what stakeholder orientation is all about, which is one of the other conscious capitalism principles. So we're creating that altruistic environment. We're getting rid of the selfish actors in the group, and we're maintaining a altruistic group environment, both inside the company and outside the company. So you've got highly engaged, motivated, excited employees who feel emancipated to come in every day and do what they do best for their team, in conscious capitalism, also in service of a higher purpose, something that the company is striving to do. One, just a glaring example of what happens when this goes wrong is what GM did when it basically decided that it wasn't paying its, it was gonna pay less to all of its suppliers just across the board, which is a very selfish thing to do if you want to think of it in selfishness versus altruism terms, and basically wreck the economic environment for everybody. And in the end, GM paid for that, as all of its suppliers went and found other customers that they preferred to work with until GM came back around again. So that's essentially what conscious capitalism is. It's conscious leader maintaining an altruistic environment and getting rid of the selfish actors both within and outside the group, and keeping the group focused on whatever higher purpose that group is motivated and excited to do.
I think it's a great point that you got to make it very intentional to remove sort of toxic behavior, because that spoils it for everybody. So in some cases, that's an important step, Paul. Yeah, and
it could be a manager that just doesn't, just not the right fit, like the Kathy got rid of early on, or somebody who thought it was all about them versus the group thing.
So from my perspective, I've been involved in manufacturing, primarily lean manufacturing, for about 30 years, and worked at a number of different companies, consulted for 4 years, and I've seen a lot of different cultures, and good positive culture eats strategy for breakfast every time, all the time. That's the one thing that was obvious coming out of that. So if you're sitting there saying to yourself, well, I've got some stakeholders, shareholders, etc., within my organization that's very shareholder oriented or ownership oriented, and how would I get people on board? I would start with that thought that you want to move from a transactional type of environment to a trust type of environment, which is what Gavin and Kathy are describing. You want to create a level of trust, but it's not just with your employees. I believe we're at a point of inflection in business today that happens once every 20, 30 years. If you think about capitalism over the years, it's changed. It's not the same capitalism. 1970s, 1950s, people looked at companies as something that they were going to join and be there for 40 years. And in the 70s, that radically changed when we said there was only one body that had any power, which was the shareholders, and every decision should be made for the shareholders. And I equate this to if you've ever heard of a guy called Dick Fosbury. Dick Fosbury was an athlete in the Mexico Olympics. He was a high jumper, and he became famous for what's called the Fosbury flop. Up until that point in time, any high jumper, all trained, learned what was called the straddle, the forward straddle, and everybody jumps that way. And that was the way you jumped, and that's the way you trained, and that's what you learned. And there was assumptions built into this. And Dick came along after, through his high school, through college, learned a different way. Now, some things changed on the ground, just like there's going on right now, in that they started putting foam in the pits. So the conditions under which the high jump had changed, and people really didn't understand that. But he did, and he came along and came up with a different way of jumping, which was you jump absolutely backwards to what was being done. Which was what we now recognize as the best way to jump. Now, here's the interesting thing. He won the Olympics in Mexico, and the Olympic gold in Mexico, and it became an overnight sensation. It took him 10 years to become an overnight sensation, practicing his technique and building off of what was there until he had it developed and understood, and he was competent at it. But then it took another 12 years, Olympic years, 4 more Olympics, I think, before every straddler had finally stopped trying to jump as a straddler, because the results were undeniable that this was a better approach to high jumping, something that people had done from day one of existence, jumping and running and things like that. He had come up with a different way of doing it, and now it became the de facto way of jumping for the next until now. And nobody's come up with a better way. I'm sure somewhere along the line, somebody's going to come up with a better technique. I believe in capitalism, we're at that point. Whereas in the 70s, we moved to this transactional model that the company could, always ran to the lowest cost, get to Mexico, get to Asia, get to wherever is the lowest cost. Don't worry about the people, that's their problem. Don't worry about the environment, that's somebody else's problem. And now we're at a point where we're saying, no, we're leaving all this value on the table. We're not engaging our suppliers properly. We're not engaging our customers properly. We're not engaging our community properly. We're not engaging our employees properly. And if we're able to get all these folks to trust us and we built this bond with them, then we would have a really strong force. Too many companies today start business and their first thought is, what's my exit strategy? Not how do I build a multi-generational business like Kathy's. And we're at that point now where employees through the Great Resignation are pointing that out by saying, I don't want to work for a company that is, I'm just a part of their balance sheet. I want to work for a company that has a purpose that I can believe in. I want to work for a company that is serving my community and is doing positive things in my community. Now, one last thought I'd leave you on this is, why are you all members of the Chamber of Commerce? Because you believe the community, the Chamber of Commerce, rightly so, makes you a better, stronger organization, because your investment in that community, both in time and effort and energy, prove that. So there are these communities, and that's what conscious capitalism is about, is recognizing these communities should have a say in your business, not just the owners and stakeholders or shareholders, but these other parties that are vested. If your business left the town that you're in, does it have an impact on the community? Yes, and vice versa. If your town left you and decided we're going to boycott you, it'd be the same thing, right? So it's recognizing those things and showing it as a whole picture, as opposed to a isolated transactional thing. That's why I believe that conscious capitalism is the way to go. The business that I'm involved in right now is a startup. It's a manufacturing startup, and I'm starting it up based upon the principles of conscious capitalism. So I'm sort of kind of fully vested in this concept too.
Now, Glenn, let me jump in. Those are all great responses, and I think I hear from everyone that profits are going to come if you are running your company this way. But have any of you encountered situations where you felt like you had to put conscious capitalism or the concept of it ahead of a profit decision? Very direct point, and maybe share that and why that worked and why maybe that paid off in the long run.
Well, for me, that's easy. I mean, there's been, in instances from, like, for instance, I was actually just talking to a friend at Bigelow Tea, and we have an HR department. I have an HR department. They have an HR department, and there was a person who was a really great worker and didn't show up for 3 days and didn't call in. And so the policy is, you don't call in, you don't, you get fired. And I've had the same thing happen here with employees. But a conscious capitalism company finds a way to find out what's happening with that employee. They don't just go by the rules. They find out what's happening with that employee and work with them. And if they're in the middle of some kind of a crisis, try and support them through. And sometimes that's not convenient for the business short term, but in the long term, it definitely is. And in the recession, I definitely kept people on and drained cash that was, a concern to me doing that. But I felt like they were part of the team. They added value. They needed us during that time, and we were going to need them, when we came out of it. And I was confident that we'd find a way to get through that. And so, yeah, we drained a lot of cash during that time to keep people in the company so that they would be there for the future, and also because it was important for them as well.
And obviously, given the workforce constraints, that paid off, that you had those employees who were indebted to the company, especially as everyone now is looking for workforce. Anyone else?
Yeah, they're still here, and there's people try to poach all the time. Like large corporations, Pratt and EB are kind of famous for that. But if you want your people to be unpoachable, pay them well, but also create an environment that they can't imagine leaving. They'd be leaving their friends and their family.
Anyone else want to comment on that?
Sure. From the last company I worked at, we established a gain sharing program. We didn't have to. We were making pretty good money as an organization, but we realized that if we didn't share the gains and align our people with the idea of what we're trying to achieve as a company, and reward them for it, gain sharing is a little different than profit sharing, because what you're trying to do is establish clear performance gains that you want to identify as an organization, and that you're going to reward in a relatively short time frame. And by doing that, we got them to see a bigger picture than well, I'm doing my job. I came here, I did what you asked me to do. Is no, here's our goals as an organization. Now they were interested in where we were going and what we're trying to do. It cost us some money up front, but in the long run, it paid off handsomely, because every morning I will go do my walkthrough on the floor. You get questions, they want to see the information, they want to understand how they can help, and you get alignment that way. And it helps, and it's got to be real and meaningful. It wasn't, $20. It was, an employee could make on a quarterly basis an extra $2,000 or $3,000 each, and it helped them significantly. Other ways I would say, just as another simple one, was going back to what Kathy said about having to let somebody go. If somebody isn't living up to the values, you have a short-term loss if you have to let them go. Now, you don't start out with, I'm going to let you go. You start out with, here's where you're not living up to the values. Here's what needs to be done. Here's what needs to be fixed. We had an employee who was probably our best performer on second shift in terms of knowledge base, understanding, ability to fix problems, troubleshooting. But he was a bit of a bully in terms of not sharing information, not allowing others to grow, things like that. And what we found, we were very concerned about letting this person go, because they had a lot of inbuilt knowledge. But we found out very quickly was that literally within a month, everybody else bloomed, because we've taken this restriction out of the process that was there for 3 to 5 years. And now others saw an opportunity to step forward. They were helping each other. They understood we were going to stand behind our values, and that we really meant what we meant, and that they felt much more confident that if they follow the values, if they follow and bought into the concept of what we're trying to do as a company, they would be supported, rewarded, and developed. And I think that's the big part, is you obviously have to follow through and make those. It doesn't make, conscious capitalism doesn't make decisions easier, it makes them clearer. Okay, and that's what we want to get to, is clearer decisions that are obvious, that people understand that's what happens. It's the cause and effect thing, but it's fair cause and effect, and that's easy for people to buy into. It's when uncertainty is in your organization, that's when people tend not to step forward, because they're not sure what's going to happen.
And being aligned with the values is a big part of any kind of review. I mean, as I said, in my company, we're focusing on the system, and we use lean tools to do this, which Paul, consulted in, is very familiar with, so that we're constantly trying to improve the system. And so I tell new people, you can make mistakes, you can have problems. The one thing that will mean you cannot work here is if you break the values. The rest of it will work with you in. The values is the piece that is primary above everything.
How do you balance, and I think we've seen this, a lot of different statements from companies at different points in time. And then, various other people have called out those statements of saying, oh, you made the statement, but it doesn't match up with what's going on. A lot of people want to put out statements right now. Maybe they haven't adopted the values. What do you see kind of in the marketplace right now? Kevin, you want to jump on that?
Sure. Yeah, I think if you're talking about like a purpose statement, like what the company is going to do. Yeah. So
or just responding to issues of the day. As occurred as well. So.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's got to be authentic. Obviously, there's And people, people can tell. They know right away whether you are the sort of, they know who you are. They know what your track record has been, and they'll know whether or not this is consistent with who you are, or whether this is a big shift. And it, a lot of the thinking that Paul was talking about before, that, that it's all about the shareholders and maximizing value and all of that sort of thing, that really gets in the way of the whole purpose and values thing. People have to understand that comes secondary. So the way that I explained it, so one of the things that we would do is we had a 2-day onboarding thing with all of our employees, and I'd spend about an hour and a half with them over lunch, talking to them about things and my business philosophy. And I would say, look, everybody here is breathing, but that's not why you exist. And the company has to make money. Otherwise it stops existing, but that's not why it's here. We're all here for something much more than that. And at our company, we said we're an invested fellowship fostering health and happiness for all. And what that really meant was we are invested in each other. So each of us as human beings has our own path, our own thing that we're trying to do, where we're trying to go, who we're trying to become. And what we're doing is we're investing in each other, helping each other along that path. Because if along each of our chosen paths, because if you're working in a group that's supportive and helping you to do the things that you are trying to do, that's wonderful. That's the sort of place that you want to be. So not sure if I really answered your question exactly, but it's all about authenticity and being about human beings and caring about what we're all here for, not about making money.
And maybe along that same lines of what I was asking is expectations of what people, when they hear conscious capitalism, they're not a part of your company, let's say, what then their expectation is. What that means for the community. Obviously, we're talking about that the business supports community, but that also doesn't mean that you're going to be commenting on every issue that's going on at City Hall, let's say. And so how do you balance that between the expectations that may be produced in the community as to what the conscious capitalism means, and being a company that's corporately responsible, but also, at the end of the day, you're also you're supporting the community, but you're also trying to make a product that meets to that end as well. You want to jump on that? Threw a lot in there.
I think you got to start with yourself first. I mean, you can't go out and say, hey, I read about this in a book. Now I'm fully trained and I'm going to be out talking about everything. It's not social capitalism. It's conscious capitalism. And just like I'll go back to my friend Dick Fosbury here. He spent 10 years practicing it before he sort of came out and revealed it and succeeded. So I think you start with yourself in terms of making sure that your values are clear, that you're living them yourself each and every day, that you've developed the habits necessary to communicate them with quiet confidence and strong belief. And once you've done that, and that the organization as a leadership team buys into them, then you can expand beyond that. It goes back to the 7 habits, circle of influence and circle of concern. You want to work from your circle of influence before you start working outside in your circle of concern. So if you work from your circle of influence, you start to develop trust within your team, and then it expands slowly out from there to your employees, to your suppliers. Your suppliers start saying, hey, I really like working with these guys because they're easy to deal with, they pay on time, they do the thing, they, all those things. So I'm going to see what I can do to help them succeed because they're inviting me in and asking for help on their designs and things like that and so on. Going back to what Gavin said as well there, when you describe the capital aspect, at the end of the day, we got to separate between what I call impatient capital and patient capital. And we want to make sure that we're aligned with folks that have patient capital and understands that in the long run, this helps you make more money that you can then purpose for the right things, because you have to make a profit, and the profit feeds your purpose as an organization. And if you do those things, your ability to see what your purpose is from multi-dimensions flowers, because you start to see it in your product, in your service to the community, and in different things through your employees, because they bring ideas that fit your purpose to the table that you would never have thought of, because you find their hidden skills. It's amazing how many hidden skills your employees have that you never know about until we move beyond a transactional environment. And then suddenly all these hidden skills come out. They might be a real estate agent as a part-time, or they, we had folks that did a cookie and strawberry company on the side. Another one sold cars, and suddenly you learn all these different skills. That one had a food truck on the weekends, and it's like, wow, all these things our employees were doing to make ends meet could add value to our company if we only knew how to see them and engage them. But it starts from that core on the inside of, are we doing the right things first, and never mind trying to influence the outside world. Let them, they'll come to us because they see us as authentic and they wonder what you're doing, as opposed to the other way around.
I do want to let everyone know, if you want to put your questions in the chat. I did see in the chat, someone had commented about what you were speaking about there, Paul, earlier on, talking about the Fosbury example and really that inflection point with what we've seen with workforce of late. But
That's
other
all I
questions,
got.
that's all you got. All right, good. Other questions, feel free to put those into the chat as you have them. Glenn, any topics that you want to jump on?
Yeah, if I could just throw one in here. I mean, it's kind of relating to sustainability. A lot of a lot of organizations see the responsibilities of particularly manufacturers, because they're all on the call here, see that they have responsibility to the planet to continue to operate profitably, but also not to continue to degrade the planet. So the planet Earth is now one of our key stakeholders, right? And the sooner we can kind of incorporate that into our business models, the better we are. But it is a friction point with a lot of stakeholders. So I'd love to sort of push that out there to these guys that are working in the manufacturing business, to see how they can sort of explain that to people, that Mother Earth is one of our key stakeholders.
So my company, one big market that I sell into is cosmetics and personal care, and that the whole sustainability conversation is huge. Every article that you see coming out of that is about all the different supply chain people trying to recycle, repurpose, reuse, try and make greener products, avoid, conflict minerals and slave labor and things like that. So on a global level, that particular marketplace is really working very hard to change their packaging and change their formulas so that they're more sustainable. So it's good business for me to do what I believe in anyway, which is to try and continue to work hard on reuse, repurpose, recycle, and put those, and also to work with have diverse group of employees and work with diverse companies. Those are things that, from a business standpoint, make me a very a good partner for these larger corporations. And one of the reasons that I joined this group is because I already had these ideas, but I didn't really have any kind of a cohort that I could talk to them about, and I didn't have tools for implementing them. I worked with a consultant to put together our values and to do training around the values and to incorporate the values into our day-to-day operation. But I didn't really have anybody to help me with these larger issues. And I also have always been concerned with what to me seemed like our global economics and the booms and the busts being driven by large actors who were managing for short-term goals, quarterly returns, and that, to me, that was not sustainable at any level, and that the rules of the game are wrong. And I'm reading a book that actually Gavin recommended called Donut Economics. And one of the things that the author gets into is measuring success by GDP. And where did that artificial construct come from in the first place? And she calls it, you know, the cuckoo in the nest. You know, that this egg of GDP growth being the primary thing that we know things are going well when we're growing. That's not sustainable in the long term. So how do we get enough people, enough businesses, and there's some very large businesses, publicly traded businesses involved in conscious capitalism. How do we get momentum to actually influence the rules of the game so that it goes back to managing buy and hold, good to great, managing for long-term sustainability, as opposed to, you know, people like Ivan Boesky and Michael Milken buying companies with debt, and then stripping every bit of value out, getting rid of the best trained employees, cutting out their retirement benefits, cutting their wages, offshoring, getting rid of R&D, all the things that made the middle class, because it was not the unions that made the middle class. Unions came about as a result of robber barons and crony capitalism. They did not come about, you know, for any positive. They came out to respond to a negative. So how do we get momentum to change the rules of the game? So I'm very interested in this topic, both at a micro and a macro level.
Well, I love the way you sort of fold that in, Kathy, because you're working with consumer goods companies and they know that, you know, every purchase people make is a vote for the kind of world they want. So I love the way you're interacting fairly closely with that community. And I've also noticed the way you've organized your principles within your organization fit within them in they're satisfying their needs of sustainable partners in, you know, in the kind of production that you contribute to their overall ecosystem too. So the sustainability piece has become sort of a North Star for your organization, and the way it clicks into your larger ecosystem of vendors, I think would be is proved to be quite a good alignment for you. Is that right?
You know, there's only, yes, and there's only two other companies that do what I do. It's a very tiny niche market in the United States. And one of them is owned by ITW. And ITW is famous or infamous for managing based on their 80-20 principles. And I got friendly with one of their managers when they were looking at potentially buying my company. And we decided that we not to sell because we had no confidence that they would keep the company going and keep all of our employees. And so we decided that we were going to keep it. But the other thing that has happened is in this friend that I made we stayed in touch, and he left. And he said to me, the reason I left is because we had a profitable quarter, but we did not reach our goals. And I was told that I needed to let go a couple people in order to meet the goals. And so basically what's happened to my competitor is they have lost their talent. And it's benefiting me because more and more companies are starting to really get that happened, that they don't have anybody to go to, that the people who answer the phone are not going to turn themselves inside out to respond to their needs. And so I'm actually getting business because of that. And I think that's a perfect example of a company managing for short-term numbers as opposed to a company managing for long-term stability and value added to all stakeholders.
You know, and Glenn, you know, one of the questions and discussions that broke out on the chat was the role of profits. And I know we talked about, you know, we're not just here focused on shareholder maximization, but how is that balance? Especially, I've served in the military, so used to a very easy chain of command. And I think a lot of our business people will say it's easier when you only have one boss. So how do you make that balance of that you still are active to try to make profit, but you're balancing these other interests, and how do you kind of keep yourself in step? Because I think anyone on the call, if they've had two bosses before, they know that that always runs into some type of challenge. So how do you do that in the conscious capitalism framework?
I just want to speak real quickly to that because, I think that a lot of these challenges actually are the genesis of creative solutions for your business that are going to lead you to a different, better place. So, like I see the note about the plastics, and that's a huge one. I mean, that's just a really, really big problem that everybody recognizes on a global scale. So in creating more sustainable packaging, in that effort, more packaging is being converted into paper products, and products that maybe look like plastics but are made out of paper composites. That causes a big problem for the decorators because the tools that are used to decorate onto plastics and the films and things are different than what's used on plastic. And then you get into the supply chain piece, which is that even if you make a lot of these green products, we do not have the recycling infrastructure in this country to actually be able to handle the products that are being designed. When you throw your milk carton away, if you throw it away with the cap on, then your entire bag of garbage ends up getting sent straight to the landfill, because that thing that's going through the scanner just directs the whole thing in an opposite direction. So there's tremendous opportunity for new businesses around the technology for scanning and sorting the waste, for composting, for all these different things. And it's challenging me to come up with new products that add value to the market that are probably going to be more towards the automation side and less on the decoration side. So if you look at these real problems, they actually present opportunities.
Anyone else want to jump in there?
Sure, I'd say, and it's sort of the obvious thing that, that there's that, like Kathy's saying, it's short-term, long-term thinking, but it's also right and wrong thinking. So, like if you are doing the things to help your employees along, to work with them and to do, give them flexibility if they need to do some childcare things and whatever. It's tough on the short term, but on the long term, that you're setting the right examples. When you get rid of that customer who would, if you've got a customer who's going to switch for half a penny, then and buys from somebody else, that is not a good relationship. As soon as you can find somebody to replace that customer, get rid of that one, because they're just going to suck you down. They're the ones who are going to call up. Everybody knows this. They're those high maintenance customers, the same ones who don't pay their bills on time, that call up last minute and need something rush. They want all the special handling and all that sort of thing, and they're the ones who will leave for half a penny. So it's what you're doing is you're deliberately creating an ecosystem where everybody cares about each other, and that's the ecosystem that's going to survive and outperform the one with the selfish individuals in it, essentially. Yeah. There was a question in the chat about focusing on true cost to society and things, and conscious capitalism is so that's more of a B Corp type thing. So the benefit corps and the becoming a certified B Corp, that path is a lot more measuring and figuring out and determining exactly how you're doing on certain metrics. Conscious capitalism is more of the if you want to say like the B Corp thing is more of like the dogma of like a religious thing, and conscious capitalism is more of the spiritual part of it. So it's more of like, how are you thinking about it? How are you addressing issues? How are you being consistent from a more philosophical point of view? And that, less about necessarily measuring stuff. You can absolutely measure stuff if you want to. But as we can all see too, like these systems of measuring are constantly changing, and new systems are coming online all the time, people trying to figure out what to benchmark themselves against and that sort of thing. So, conscious capitalism is more about the overall looking at the system and trying to do the right thing for the people, the planet, and society.
I'd like to chime in there a little bit. When you talked about Garrett, when you talked about as a military person, you had one boss. I would suspect that you swore to defend the Constitution when you signed up, right? That's your real boss. Okay, the other guy's giving you orders, or the other lady's giving you orders. It's the same thing in business. We're looking to defend our values and focus on our purpose and focus on our vision and mission. We're not trying to serve. Once everybody agrees, whether our stakeholders or shareholders, if we all agree, that's our vision, mission. Then all we're doing is focusing on answering questions as they relate to those mission, vision, values, and purpose, as opposed to what did my boss tell me to do today? Because then we're back into transactional aspects. Second, with respect to the environment, I would couch the answer this way: a conscious capitalism-based company builds its strength from within and from within its community. So it's going to be better prepared to answer those questions about, just like Kathy was talking, these are not simple questions anymore. There's no more low-hanging fruit. It's about how are you going to handle these very complex questions. Society is going to continue, commerce is going to continue. So therefore, how do we do it in a sustainable way? And a company that has a bent towards conscious capitalism, where its people are in a trusting mode, or bringing these questions up and trusting and expecting honest answers and doing the hard work, is much more likely to get the right answers and not to greenwash or wallpaper the situation with, our plastics are 33% more recyclable, but you can still throw it away and it won't be recycled. They're going to be much more conscious about getting to authentic answers about, well, are we really recycling? How do we go about fixing that problem? And how do we create a movement that is authentic, as opposed to something that just meets the next quarter's bottom line and garners more sales because we're able to stick a label on the front of our unrecycled plastic bottles.
Thanks, Paul. Well, we're wrapping up on time. Glenn, maybe best way we can kind of close out, and if anyone wants to add into this, how do companies take that first step if they want to? How do they get more involved with Conscious Capitalism Connecticut chapter?
Thanks, Garrett.
Get in touch with Glenn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just hold on a sec.
I expect that an awful lot of the members.
Thanks, Garrett. Yeah, I
expect that a lot of the members of the chamber are actually very conscious capitalists, because smaller local businesses, really do give back to their communities and really do give back to their people. There's probably a lot of people on this call who are operating in exactly that way.
Thanks, Kathy, and thanks, Garrett, for setting this up. I mean, we are very social in the way that we do business. We've got a great Curious Capitalist podcast series, of which has been now in our 32nd episode, and we do events on a regular basis, and which is where we've had those great companies that we shared before. And this year it's been interesting because we've had a lot of people, CEOs, come and say, "This is all great, but how do we do it?" All right, so we listened. And we learned and we created this great leadership network that just kicked off last week, actually, at District, where we've got a group of young leaders, CEOs of companies, mid-cap businesses, that are all struggling with these issues of like how to be a good corporate citizen, how to make money, how to retain people. And obviously it's issues that we're all dealing with. And so we decided to create a toolbox where people could help themselves to come together and solve these problems. So the first cohort is underway, and of course we'll be rolling again with that next year. And my details are all here. Like I said earlier, I'm the executive director, and I serve these people on the board that joined us today. And it's a pleasure to hear you both articulate some big ideas to an audience at the chamber. And Garrett, it's a pleasure to see you again. and share these big ideas with your community, and really enjoyed doing so.
Thanks, Glenn. And thank you, everyone. Gavin, Paul, Kathy, appreciate you serving on the panel. Look forward to seeing everyone. We have November 17th and 18th as the Big Connect, and you can watch this program that we just did. It will be available on our YouTube page for download, or go anytime and watch on demand. A big thank you again to Glenn and everyone at Conscious Capitalism for being a part of this. Hope everyone has a great day.